Some people don't break, even when life keeps hitting them. They smile, they function, they keep showing up. But if you look closely, there's something different about them. They don't react the way others do. They don't get excited too easily. They don't trust too quickly. And when something goes wrong, they don't panic. Not because they're strong, but because they've already been through worse. There's a kind of person who has experienced so much that pain stops feeling like an event. It becomes a baseline. And once that happens, something inside them quietly changes. At first, nobody notices. In fact, people admire them. They're so calm. They handle everything so well. They never complain. But what looks like strength is often something else entirely. It's adaptation. Because when someone goes through too much, their mind doesn't just endure it. It reshapes itself around it. Think about a child who grows up in an environment where emotions are unpredictable. Some days are peaceful, some days are tense. Some days feel like walking on eggshells. That child learns something very quickly. Pay attention, stay alert, don't make things worse. So instead of playing freely, they observe. Instead of expressing emotions, they regulate them. Instead of depending on others, they become independent. Not because they want to, but because they have to. And that pattern doesn't just disappear when they grow up. It follows them into friendships, into relationships, into every room they walk into. You can see it in the way they scan people's expressions, the way they notice tone shifts, the way they adjust their behavior without even thinking. Because their brain learned early on that awareness equals safety. But here's where it gets deeper. When someone has gone through too much, they don't just become aware. They become controlled. Their emotions don't disappear. They just get quieter. Contained. Because at some point, expressing those emotions didn't help. Maybe it made things worse. Maybe it was ignored. Maybe it was punished. So the brain makes a decision. Feel it, but don't show it. And over time, that becomes automatic. They can be hurting deeply, and no one would know. They can be overwhelmed and still appear calm. They can be struggling and still be the one helping others. And this is why people who have gone through too much often become the strongest person in the room. Not because they don't feel pain, but because they've learned how to carry it. Quietly. There's a story that plays out again and again in people like this. Imagine someone who is always the reliable one. The friend everyone calls when something goes wrong. The person who gives advice, shows up, listens, supports. They are always there. But when it comes to their own problems, they stay silent. Not because they don't have any, but because they've learned that their role is to be the stable one, and breaking that role feels unfamiliar, almost unsafe. Because when you've been the strong one for so long, you forget what it feels like to be supported. And even when support is available, it feels uncomfortable, like wearing something that doesn't quite fit. So instead, they keep everything inside. And over time, that creates a quiet kind of loneliness. Not the kind where you're alone, but the kind where no one really sees you. There's also something else that happens. When someone has experienced repeated pain, disappointment, or instability, their brain starts predicting it. Not consciously, but automatically. Even when things are going well, there's a part of them waiting for it to go wrong. Not in a dramatic way, just a quiet expectation. Enjoy it while it lasts. Something will change. Don't get too comfortable. This is what psychologists sometimes describe as a protective pattern. The brain lowers expectations to reduce future pain, because if you don't expect too much, you won't be as disappointed. But the downside is, you also stop fully experiencing the good. You hold back. You don't get too attached. You don't get too hopeful. Because hope feels risky. And this affects relationships in ways that are hard to explain. People who have gone through too much often struggle with closeness. not because they don't want it, but because closeness means vulnerability. And vulnerability has a history. It reminds them of times when being open led to pain. So they do something subtle, they stay slightly distant. Even with people they care about, even with people they trust, there's always a part of them that holds back. Not fully in, not fully out, just protected. And from the outside, this can be misunderstood. People might think they're cold, detached, uninterested. But the truth is, they feel deeply. They just don't feel safe showing it. There's another layer to this that's often overlooked. People who have gone through too much become incredibly good at reading others. They notice small details, micro-expressions, energy shifts, unspoken tension. Because growing up, they had to. It was a survival skill, and now it's part of who they are. But this ability comes with a cost. They overthink, they analyze everything, they replay conversations, they look for hidden meanings. Not because they want to, but because their brain is wired to detect patterns, to anticipate problems, to stay one step ahead. And while that can make them perceptive, it can also make them restless, because their mind rarely turns off, even in peaceful moments, even when nothing is wrong. And that's because their nervous system isn't used to peace, it's used to vigilance. So when things get quiet, their brain starts searching, looking for something to fix, something to prepare for, something to control. Because stillness feels unfamiliar, and sometimes unfamiliar feels unsafe. But here's the part that changes everything. People who have gone through too much are not broken. They are adapted. Every behavior they have, every pattern, every reaction, it all made sense at some point. It helped them survive something difficult. It kept them safe, and in many ways, it made them incredibly resilient. They can handle pressure, they can endure pain, they can keep going when others would stop. But survival isn't the same as living, and that's the quiet realization many of them come to. At some point, they start to feel tired. Not physically, emotionally. Tired of always being strong. Tired of always holding everything together. Tired of never letting themselves fall apart. And that's where something new begins. Because healing doesn't mean becoming someone else. It means slowly unlearning the idea that you always have to carry everything alone. It means realizing that not every situation is a threat. That not every person will hurt you. That not every moment requires you to be on guard, and that process takes time. Because you're not just changing behavior. You're changing patterns that have been there for years. But it starts with something simple. Awareness. Noticing when you're holding back. Noticing when you're over-controlling. Noticing when you're expecting things to go wrong, even when they're not. And slowly, gently, allowing something different. Letting yourself trust a little more. Feel a little more. Rest a little more. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Because the same mind that learned to survive can also learn to feel safe again. And if any part of this felt familiar, if you saw yourself somewhere in these patterns, then maybe this isn't just information. Maybe it's recognition. And sometimes, being understood is the first step towards something changing. So if this made you feel seen, like someone finally put into words something you've been carrying quietly, you might want to stay around for more of these conversations, because understanding yourself is where everything starts to shift.